Hi, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is listening beyond the sound bites. Today we're talking about a very difficult subject, the right to life versus abortion. I have with me tonight Mary Beerworth, who's the Executive Director of the Vermont Right to Life Committee. I got that name right.
Thank you for having me, Pat.
Yes, you're welcome. And Gail Graham, who is a retired registered nurse, who is also, both ladies have been on the show before, and we're glad that they're joining us tonight for this difficult discussion. I'd like to offer anyone who is on the pro-abortion side to give me a call, to contact me, and we would love to have you on the show, because we'd like to present both parts of this issue. So, Mayor, we could get started. Could you give us an overview of the Vermont Right to Life Committee?
Sure. Vermont Right to Life was established as the voice of the unborn in 1971 because abortion was a big front page newsmaker here in Vermont, even before Roe versus Wade. So the voice of the unborn had multiple chapters around the state, rising up to promote the beauty and the sanctity of human life in the womb from the moment of conception. And then in 1974, the organization became the chapter affiliate of the National Right to Life Committee, and the name was changed to the Vermont Right to Life Committee. And that right to life comes from the founding document of our country, the Declaration of Independence, which establishes that we're endowed by our Creator with the first right, the right to life, then the right to liberty and pursuit of happiness.
I don't know if I ever heard that. That's wonderful.
The founding fathers in their wisdom knew that life, no other rights mattered if you didn't have your right to life.
Right.
So that is why we are the Vermont Right to Life Committee.
Great. Could you talk a little bit about the priorities of your organization and what you hope to accomplish?
Thank you for giving me this opportunity, Pat. I appreciate
No problem.
it. So people do misunderstand the Vermont Right to Life Committee, so I'm always happy to have an opportunity to chat. First and foremost, we're an educational organization. We want to promote the beauty of life in the womb. We want to talk about fetal development. We want to talk about alternatives to abortion. You will see us at the State House where the laws are made, trying to pass such things as parental involvement laws so that a minor girl, the abortion clinic has to contact the parent for her own health and safety. Right. So those are the kinds of issues. We've also put women's right to know legislation in. So they see us at the State House, sort of we get a feeling of being a political organization, but primarily in everything we do, it's educational with the goal of reducing the number of abortions, and we'd like to see that number at zero.
Right. Yeah. Do you know, you just mentioned parental notification. We're going to have to talk about that later because in passing their latest legislation, which we'll talk about, they didn't even mention parental notification. And as a parent, and you were just saying, for the safety and health of the child, if you don't know where your child is and comes home, having had that procedure, I'd like to know. But there you are.
Yeah.
Anyway, Gail, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on.
Gail was on a show. She was on the USS Hope as a nurse.
The ship that's gotten so much attention, right?
It was a great show. You were gone for 10 months, if I remember, 10 months?
Yes, I was down in Cartagena, South America.
Yeah,
yes.
Great. That says a lot about you because they just don't pick nurses to go on this boat. So could you give us a little bit of background about you and
Okay, I attended nursing school at Mary Hitchcock in Hanover, New Hampshire, where it was at the time. Now Mary Hitchcock is part of Dartmouth. And I, I did a post-grad course in operating room surgical procedure. And long story short, I had a lot of traveling. I ultimately ended up in California, Southern California, and that's where I was when I I was working with a doctor that went on the ship Hope to Nicaragua the year before. So he encouraged me to apply, and I went, okay. And the rest was history, and it was a wonderful, wonderful experience.
Right.
As I say, lots of, I won't get into some of, maybe later we talk about some of the related subjects.
But you tell me that the people have reunions every so often. That must be great just to relive the memories.
Lots of good friends.
That's great.
And then the last job I had in my career was a legal nurse consultant in California for hospitals that were self-insured for their liability insurance. So I've had a varied experience.
But then you came back home.
I did. Back to the family farm.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we're glad you're here.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
Yes. Mayor, could we talk, I just thought for people watching, let's go back, because we were just talking before about how little people know about the new legislation, and maybe if you could just do a high-level Roe versus Wade, and then we can work into our legislation.
Sure. Well, Roe versus Wade was a Supreme Court decision handed down in 1973, using the shadows of the penumbra of the right to privacy to establish that a right to an abortion throughout all 9 months of pregnancy, throwing out and overturning the laws in all 50 states that acknowledged that a human life was it was a human life at the moment of conception. And those laws were put in place by the medical community that had discovered through microscopes and more modern technology in the mid-1800s that a life began at conception. And so they moved quickly to get these laws in place to protect unborn children. So that law set off a firestorm of controversy. But the controversy here in Vermont had started a year before that. So there was a Supreme Court decision, Patrick Leahy, our U.S. Senator, was the Chittenden County State's Attorney at the time. He admits that he did not offer a defense for Vermont's pro-life law. And so the Vermont Supreme Court overturned those laws in place. The eyes turned to the legislature to take action, and they couldn't come to agreement. And so there was no law. After they overturned the old law, there was nothing in place in Vermont to protect an unborn child. The legislature didn't move, and then Roe v. Wade was handed down by the Supreme Court, leaving us by default with nothing in place in Vermont. And so any subsequent attempts to pass legislation protecting the unborn child, the health and safety of the mother, offering alternatives to abortion, all of those things have been roundly rejected by the legislature. And then along comes 2019, and in response to the appointment of Brett Kavanaugh to the U.S. Supreme Court and the absolute unbridled hatred for the President of the United States, Planned Parenthood, the largest abortion provider in Vermont, moved into the State House to essentially pass two pieces of legislation. One is H57, now Act 47, that essentially confirms in law, state sanctions the gap that was there with no law, to put in place now in statute no law surrounding abortion. Nothing that can affect the abortion business, no regulations, no safety standards, no inspections, no limit at 25 weeks, nothing is in place. So you take a quick look, Act 47, and you'll see that what I'm saying is very simple legislation, that what I'm saying is true. And all amendments offered to amend the H57 were roundly rejected. They were not content with having now a state law embedded in our statutes. They want to go further and add that same language to our Constitution under Proposal 5.
And when is that coming on the ballot, this year or next year?
No, it has to be voted on one more time in the legislature. They cannot change any language. So the language is set. It's just one sentence.
This was not the second year, or it had to be a biennium?
No, it has to be in two different bienniums.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
So after this
Shame on me.
election, it'll either be in 2021 or 2022. There'll be one more vote taken by the legislature, and then it will be on our ballot in the general election of 2022.
Well, I can imagine all of the effort to get the word out to everybody in Vermont.
It's going to be a big fight.
Yeah, that means it.
Yeah.
Because I just heard this word, unrestricted abortions. Everything I read was unrestricted abortions, and I'm like, seriously?
Unrestricted and unregulated.
Yeah,
Those are true statements of what it means. Yeah.
And we'll talk about our governor later, but I was surprised that he approved it as well.
Yes.
So it's
and that's an endorsement.
through.
That's not only now has the legislature sanctioned it, the governor has endorsed that legislation, and that makes it the most extreme legislation on abortion in the country.
Can you talk about the details of proposition? Oh no, it's Proposal 5.
Proposal 5.
Which I don't know the difference. Some things are called proposition and others are called proposal.
This is proposal, and it's very
proposal.
easy to say proposition because it sounds right.
Yeah.
So the interesting part of all of this, and I'll read the one line.
Yeah, please.
But the Vermont Right to Life Committee was in agreement with the Attorney General and with the ACLU that if it's about abortion, and it clearly is, the word abortion should be used. And they rejected that consensus. And that's why you will not, it's deceptive. And that's my feeling. This is deceptive.
Yeah, so how will people know when they go to the polls?
That what's only going to be by our communication. So they have a long purpose.
Yeah.
Not once is the word abortion used in the purpose. But here is the one sentence, that an individual's right, this is to amend our Constitution to include this, that an individual's right to personal reproductive autonomy is central to the liberty and dignity to determine one's own life course and shall not be denied or infringed unless justified by a compelling state interest achieved by the least restrictive means. That is gobbledygook for unlimited, unregulated abortion enshrined in our Constitution. And every time we ask for the meaning of personal reproductive autonomy, we were told the courts will decide what it means. So we're sacrificing our rights.
Whatever happens in D.C. Will not affect us if this passes in our Constitution.
Right, and it will mean more than just abortion. And there is a purpose for not using the word abortion, but also for this personal reproductive rights. We carefully watch the debate on Facebook and online media, and it is very big. It's expanded. It probably will mean minors will have many rights to choose sterilization, transgender surgery, all kinds of, because personal reproductive autonomy.
And they don't give any ages or anything.
There's no ages in here. There's a huge push with the climate change to not reproduce, not have children. I mean, can a 12-year-old make that sterilization decision?
Right.
The answer to that question was the courts will decide. Every question we raised. What about prostitution? Is that a personal reproductive autonomy issue? So this is unclear. And whenever something is sent to the voters, and when we're amending our Constitution, it should be crystal clear.
Yeah, it should be.
Yeah.
Because when you go in there and you don't see that word, you just may, oh well, just
sounds good.
Sounds good, right? Exactly. I think what was I going to say? Because when this all happened, there was a lot of debate at the State House. We went to there was a. Were you at that the abortion hearing at the State House?
The public hearing. They had two public hearings.
There were 10 times more of right to life people than anti-abortion. There was 1 to 9 calls coming in. Was that the right number? 1 to 9. 1 in favor, 8 or 9 opposed. Right. I mean, it was an overwhelming stuff. And I think when I talked to Lucy LaRich, who was on the show,
and she's Planned Parenthood.
And she's Planned Parenthood. She said this is exactly what we had in place, which was nothing. And she said, and I said, people are, realizing what was out there. They had no idea that there was no laws on the books.
They had no idea.
No.
Most people, if you talk to them, they think abortions are done in extremely hard cases in the early weeks of pregnancy,
Right.
and so they will say, yes, I'm pro-choice. Well, our public opinion polling shows the breakdown is the shock value that those two public hearings gave us. I mean, we woke up a lot of Vermonters for them to discover what the reality of abortion is in Vermont, and that is changing people's minds. We've added thousands of people to our mailing list from this. People have a lot more compassion for life than they just don't understand what's happening.
Right, and yet I think they can all relate to what if I was in this circumstance or that circumstance. But you can make those decisions early on. I think it's very rare that in 3 months you don't have a grasp of what situation you're in and you can make a decision.
And I think what people instinctively want is to balance the life of the mother with the life of the baby. They want some balance there,
right?
So we will see how this all unfolds.
Yeah. You and I, we talked at the State House about things like when the baby's heart stops, when the baby feels pain, and they do know this. This isn't just...
This is science.
This is science. So I don't know if you have a chart or some information that we could talk about now about when all these things occur.
Well, I can give you a few examples. We have a pro-life flyer. I don't know if it's something that, when this is available, we have thousands of copies of these flyers, but we do some fetal development. The most stunning piece of information is that at just 24 days, an unborn baby's heart begins to beat regularly. 24 days after conception.
Wow.
And that is probably the biggest heart changer piece of information we
Right.
have when you think of that heart. Now, there's something rudimentary in place even in the early days, because you have to have, circulation and growth from that baby who's rapidly subdividing from that moment of conception. But at that moment of conception, everything has been decided. Whether you're a male or a female, what your blood type is, what your sex is, but I said that. But in everything about you, blue eyes, brown eyes, probably even how you'll do in school at some point, is all that moment that the egg and the sperm are joined, so the instant of conception. A baby can suck its thumb from between 11 and 12 weeks. At 18 weeks, a baby can cry because the vocal cords are working. At 7 weeks after conception, she has fingers, toes, and ears, all fully formed. At 6 weeks, electrical patterns can be recorded from the brain. Now, some people say you die when your brain dead, but they don't say you're alive when your brain is working, and that's at just 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So at 20 weeks, the baby is 7 to 10 inches long, weighing about a pound, and she has hair and she can feel pain, and that's scientifically established at 20 weeks. So try to contemplate that babies are aborted all the way through pregnancy.
I sent you both a video I had found. Baby was born, and I'm going to show it at the end of this video. A baby was born 1 pound after 3 months. So, and then they show you how the baby outside the womb grows and matures, and all the things that are supposed to happen in the womb happen outside with what the doctors can do these days. It's really a miracle.
And the doctors will tell you viability is in flux. They can move it back. So that little baby was a pound. They've saved some babies even smaller.
Wow.
They've saved different gestational ages. Depends on a lot of variables, but they can save those little babies.
It's really amazing.
It is.
So thank you for that. Because in one state, what was it? One of the states said you cannot have an abortion the minute the baby's heart beats, and you're saying that's less than a month.
So I thank you, because I do want to clarify that and pitch in here, registered nurse, if I've got it wrong. But at 24 weeks, the baby's heart is beginning to beat regularly, but you cannot pick that up with our equipment until about 5 to 6 weeks, which leads people to think the baby's heart just started beating at 5 to 6 weeks, but it's been beating in order to take the ultrasound.
When I thought about what the state did, that's like, whoa.
Yeah,
you have to make up your mind like the next day.
And I think that the heartbeat legislation is when the heartbeat can be detected.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's still been beating, though.
It has been beating. That's the important thing, right?
Yeah. Do you have numbers on our abortions here in Vermont?
Sure. Yes, I do.
And ages? I don't know how they break them down.
They break them down so you can't really get a handle on the late-term abortions. The last year that the statistics are available are 2018. And in 2018, there were 1,204 abortions performed in Vermont. Minors under the age of 18 totaled 41. There is a breakout. We do have some out-of-state abortions that occur here, most likely the college students. The highest number of abortions occurs around that college age. They are away from home, their parent. Right. The pressure is extraordinary. Right. So they're most likely to get pregnant, most likely to choose an abortion. There are states, and we are not one of them, that understand that and provide a way for a woman to keep her baby and finish her education.
Oh.
Yes.
Nice.
And so that is something we would love to see happen.
Right.
So it looks like the hospital jumped up from about 33 abortions at the UVM Medical Center. Now, these are mostly the later term ones to doing 122.
When you say late term, could you define that? When it starts? Obviously, late term is 9 months, but
yes, but second and third, we consider our later term abortions second and third trimester, because now you're talking about those babies that are potentially viable, like the little baby you're talking about. And so they don't break it out. I can only get from 13 to 21 weeks and beyond, and that number totaled 126.
Because when I was talking to Lucy on the show, I said to her, and she said, I promise you, I guarantee that there are no 9-month abortions. So I asked her, why didn't the bill reflect that? And it didn't go very far, but I'm sure they wanted it open as far
They want it
totally
open,
open, just in
absolutely,
case.
absolutely.
But she has told me that there weren't 9 months, because when we were talking before, I can't come up with a scenario that would have me go 9 months and then ask for but obviously there is.
And I will, in all honesty, there's a lot of genetic testing, and maybe you know something about this, and this gets into later and later. They discover at 20 weeks that your baby has Down syndrome. Some are terribly tragic cases where the baby's
Spina
got
Bifida.
Well, Spina Bifida, they can do surgery and fix that little spine.
Oh, really?
They can.
Oh, nice.
They can. So it's all, but a parent may say, I can't do this, and so that's it for that little child. But these are viable babies that maybe the mother who wants them at the same age, they're over in the NICU getting all the care they need, while this one is out of luck. So.
When were they able to do? The reason I ask is I have a very dear friend in Tarrytown, New York, and her next door neighbor had a son with spina bifida, and I guess because of the age, they weren't fixing that.
Yeah, this is new.
Yeah.
And so, and actually, a pro-abortion, pro-choice reporter went in to watch one of the first surgeries, and so and when they went, they opened up the womb.
Oh my God.
They take the baby and they stitch up the spine, and this fabulous picture went around the world. I wish I had it for you. The baby flipped over at the last minute, and his hand came out and grabbed the doctor's finger.
I'd be bawling.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So Michael Clancy, the reporter, came out of that surgery and he said, "I'm pro-life." It looked like the baby was saying, "Thanks, doc."
Thank you, right? Yeah, because
So,
this young man, I saw him just recently at a funeral down there, and he's in a wheelchair, but he's a very well-known lawyer, and he's very successful, so that didn't hold him back at all.
it doesn't, and so we just would love to see those positive cases change hearts and minds, so that, and they need more support. I mean,
well,
it's
that's the
very
truth.
panicky to get a diagnosis, and now they can diagnose everything. A club foot can be a reason for an abortion. But those diagnoses don't always come in until you're around 20 to 22 weeks.
I hadn't thought about that, but you're
and
right.
then the pressure is
sure.
intense. Yeah.
Okay, so we were just talking about another state. Are there other states that have unrestricted abortions as opposed to states who say no?
There are a few, but I think we topped the list. I'm going to say Oregon and Washington State.
Oregon always pops up with us.
does.
We're always trying to beat Oregon.
Oh,
Or methadone.
Even
everything.
Massachusetts has, I think, a parental consent law. So
Really?
Page 2.
What are you doing?
they do. I know.
Thank you.
So there's something that's very disturbing, and I think we're going to ask Gail to talk about her experience. There are some states that allow a baby to die after they've unsuccessfully performed an abortion and the baby's alive and, I don't know about well, but alive and breathing, and they allow that baby to die. By law, they can do that.
They can.
Right. How does one, I'm just curious, how did that
There isn't a
become
law
not
that
murder?
says you can do that. There isn't a law that says you may not do that.
Oh.
Okay.
So by absence.
Yeah, but yes, and so the U.S. Congress has tried to pass an Infant Born Alive Protection Act, that the same care would be brought to the same baby, at the same gestational age, the same care, whatever qualified for a live miscarriage would qualify for.
And it obviously hasn't gone anywhere. People
And
are
it's been
opposed
voted
to
on
it.
something like 80 times, voted down almost 80 times in the U.S. Congress. Yeah.
Okay, so do you know why, and what's their rationale for that? I mean, if
It
it's
tends
living,
it tends to split along party lines.
yeah, does it?
Yeah.
I know what I'd call it, but there you go. I don't know, how can you take a life, and maybe we can ask Gail, because I say that, you can tell where I stand on this issue, but I'm going to say it anyway, that with every right, when they talk about women, comes responsibility, every right. I don't know one that doesn't have some responsibility with it that you as an adult need to follow, to accept that responsibility. And I find it amazing that that there are so many services available, some for free, I think, in colleges.
There are 11 crisis pregnancy centers in Vermont that operate to offer women alternatives Absolutely free. They
Free.
raise all of their money from people who support that idea
Right.
that women need, and they need a lot of support.
Right.
And they don't just need support through the pregnancy, through the delivery, but raising that child, and that's what is offered.
Yeah.
So,
Or if they choose an abortion, but at least the baby is alive and well and being in a loving home, if that's what
Adoption,
they choose.
you mean. Yes,
Adoption.
yes.
Oh, what did I say? Oh.
yeah, no, the words are mixed.
No, adoption, sorry. Gail, we put together a list of all of the products that are available for people. And I must tell you, I actually don't know one or two of these, but you probably do. Why don't you
Sure I don't.
go through that list and we can talk
Well,
about
the
it.
top of the list is the pill, of course, patch, diaphragm, spermaticide/jellies, vaginal ring, female condom shot or injection, male condom, interesting, intrauterine device, IUD, and the morning after pill, which is an emergency measure, and it cannot be used to avoid unwanted pregnancies as a contraceptive.
Yeah, because that's what we were talking before the show, that a lot of people look at this as a contraceptive, you can have sex and not worry about the baby because you've got an
The
abortion
morning
that you
after
could.
pill, yeah.
But that's a lot of things that are available, and I guess I don't understand why they don't take advantage of that.
And we have 12 Planned Parenthood clinics. This last year, they received $1.4 million in state funds to provide contraception services to low-income women or
Right.
people without resources. So I don't understand it either. And we still have a higher teen pregnancy rate than our neighbors in Maine and New Hampshire who have nothing like the clinics we have here. They have
Right.
between 4 and 5 for twice the population.
Gail?
Yeah, I'd like to interject here. Many, many years ago, when I was in California, I wanted to volunteer at some organization to work with teenage girls, okay? And I can be, counseling on what and everything about it. And this is what upset me about Planned Parenthood, was that was one of the places that I tried to volunteer, and my services were not needed. I mean, that's pretty much the way I was told. It was like, they don't, and this is upsetting to me, it still is. Shouldn't part of Planned Parenthood be like contraception?
Right.
And working with these teenage girls?
So they do reach out to young people, and they do offer their contraceptive services. They will not include abstinence education in anything they do. So that may have been why you were not appreciated.
Yeah, that was pretty much because that, as I say, where I was at the time, there were families that didn't have a big family structure
Right.
and so on
Exactly.
and so forth. But I've never forgotten it, and I tried other avenues that were totally restrictive. So, but that's been frustrating for me.
So they don't push abstinence?
Nope.
No. Because that's certainly one way to avoid
That's
this
one
whole
way to, for
discussion.
sure.
Yeah, right,
And to
exactly.
avoid the very high rising rate of STIs that we're dealing with in the
Right,
state.
right.
I mean, so young people, it seems logical, but young people, contraceptives in the hands of young people are not a reliable,
Yeah.
right? I mean, they forget to take the pill. They forget that when they're taking antibiotics for a flu or viral
Right.
infection, they forget the pill no longer works. And oftentimes the parents are not informed or don't even realize the child's on the pill.
Right, exactly.
And so that is, I mean, numerous times I've heard from young girls that they forgot
Yeah.
that the antibiotic would be contraindicated for the birth control pill and found themselves pregnant.
I'm sort of sad for those girls
I am
because
too.
they really tried. I mean, they weren't being
yes. Yes.
dismissive of the whole thing. They were really trying.
And probably no matter what, there will always be an unexpected pregnancy.
Right, right.
And so it's one of those things about rights and responsibilities that we have to look at.
So do you know what a female condom shot is?
condom shot?
Yeah.
I think it's female condom and a shot. So there's a female condom that looks like the inverse of a male condom.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then there's these shots.
Don't know this. I'm old. What's up with that?
Oh, they have all kinds of new.
I can see that.
They have new devices, new. They have this stick they place in your arm, and it releases the the hormonal stuff for months and months and months.
Oh, really?
Sometimes it stays in for more than a year. Yeah, just releasing.
It's sort of like an after birth pill all day. I mean, always with you? Or?
Yes, always with
Yeah.
you.
And the thing is, some of these devices don't work. I had a very dear friend, colleague in California that she and her husband had just gotten married. They were in Colorado and she got pregnant. And so that Christmas, they put the the diaphragm, on the Christmas tree. So their daughter was a diaphragm.
That's funny.
It was all
Good fun. Good fun. Well, listen, while we're talking about that, Gail, maybe you can set up a little bit the letter that you wrote and talk about it and why you wrote this letter and what all happened.
I'm going to read it.
Sure.
I was explaining earlier because this was emotional for me to write this. And so I want to make sure that I don't...
And this was when we were discussing the bill in the legislature, right? It sort of triggered some...
Yes. Well, yes, what triggered this really was a couple of things.
The nurse. Yeah.
Was, many months ago, the nurse at UBM Medical Center, severe repercussions because she refused to assist with a late-term abortion.
Right.
An abortion. And then with another friend of ours, Carol Fernier, and we were discussing it, and one thing led to another. And as I say, it was not easy for me to write this, but with, I think Carol's prodding, I finally did, and I shared it with you too. During the 70s, I was working in California when laws about abortions were changed. Previously, during the 60s, we occasionally had to deal with the results of failed illegal abortions. In the early 60s, I was in Newport Beach, California, which was close to Mexico, and so I was working in a hospital in Northern California area during the early 70s. I was forced to assist with an early term abortions as I was not Catholic, and I'm not putting anything against Catholics, but that
would have been your way out in the hospital?
I mean, I'm a Christian, so anyway. Politics within. So I dealt with it professionally. I specified with management of surgery that I wished not to assist with late-term abortions. At that time, some physicians were performing saline injections, which terminate the pregnancy, as a means to induce labor to terminate the pregnancy. I do not recall the designated limit of performing such procedure, but I'm quite sure there was, which leads to my horrific experience. I was working the late shift on the particular day, which was 10 a.m. to 7 p.m., so I was assigned to assist with a scheduled C-section as a scrub nurse. If I recall correctly, initially I was not aware of all of the reasons for the C-section, but soon learned when the OB surgeon started the procedure. Apparently the saline injection had not been completely successful, but most likely would have caused serious damage to the fetus. Thus, the reason for this emergency C-section, needless to say, I was not happy about being in that situation. But I had no choice at this point, as I would have been charged with abandoning my patient if I had stepped out. And thus it relates to the nurse at UBM Medical Center. The procedure was happening very quickly, and the fetus was delivered and handed off to me to take care of. Pardon me, but there is no delicate way for me to describe this scenario. My primary point here is that the fetus was viable, breathing. It was my worst nightmare in my nursing career. I had no support, and especially not from the surgeon and his assistant. I did not know what to do, so I asked the circulating nurse, who was not scrubbed, to call the pathologist and ask how I was to care for the fetus. I cannot recall how long it was breathing. That's blocked some of it. I knew that there was a law regarding such a birth. I have a stillborn sister that is buried where my parents are. I was ultimately advised to treat it like any specimen. I will spare you the rest of the story, and I really just don't want to get into it. Privately, if anyone wishes, keep me in mind as it was 48 years ago, but I never forgotten, and writing this has been painful. Yes, I approached management in surgery, including the medical chief, but they all turned a blind eye. The only one that listened to me and shared his concern was the brother of the particular OB surgeon, from whom he had been estranged for years. I recall him saying something like, "Gail, now you know why I no longer associate with my brother. I had been aware, but too aware at this point. I am sharing this part of it with you so as to address the issue of medical personnel and whether they're religious or ethical. It doesn't matter. I am concerned about the recent situation at UVMC as well. Seemingly continued discussion about not the medical folks have trained to save lives and have taken oaths to the best of our ability." Sorry.
No, thank you for sharing that. I know it was hard. And that was hard for me when I was reading it. I love the word specimen.
What is that, you know?
That's supposed
So
to be
what
the
a
baby.
dehumanizing word.
Yeah.
And as I told you, at this, I'm not sure at this point in time, and I don't want to try to say how it was handled because, I might be not saying it correctly, but it wasn't, in my estimate, it was not handled as it should have been.
Right.
But they pushed it off on you to deal with.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Horrible.
Well, that must be what, because once they finished their part, they just
were done.
pass it over. They were
Yeah.
done.
And no, absolutely no whatsoever. I mean, you can imagine.
And they refer to that as the dreaded complication of abortion, which is a breathing baby. They call it the dreaded complication. And so no one wants to hold a baby struggling to get air. And so they push that onto you. I don't blame you for having that stay with you forever. It was not fair.
Yeah, as I say, I had to push in the back of my mind, but then again, I'll reiterate, when I read about the nurse at
Well, she finally had to
it all
do it,
came
or she'd
rushing
lose-
back.
Yeah, she'd lose her job. That's what the paper said. If she didn't participate, she'd lose her job.
And that case is still
She ended-
unfolding.
Oh, is it
Yeah.
really? Good.
Yeah, and that's not right.
No.
I mean,
It isn't right.
I don't think you should be made to do that. If it's, they hire doctors willing to do it. They should hire nurses who are willing to do it, as horrible as that is. But you don't have somebody who is not supportive to do it.
And we're very concerned because we listened to a tape by one of the abortion doctors speaking to the staff and outlining the possibility of you come in to apply for a job at the medical center. Do you object to any of the following?
Right.
And then what? You don't get hired if you do?
Well,
So they may, because it's very upsetting for it makes a difficulty for those trying to schedule nurses.
Right.
On abortion day. You've said you don't want to participate. What they'd prefer, of course, naturally, is everyone willing to
Everybody, yeah, right.
participate. So then we won't be able to have a physician or a nurse care for us that isn't heavily involved in this. In the activity. So that luckily the Trump administration has reissued some extremely tight guidelines for conscience protection, and I believe they've been upheld. I believe they've been upheld by at least a federal court. So yeah, it's got some more teeth behind it, because those rules and regulations were in place without a real penalty for violation. So now there are penalties.
Or are they really good? Good for him.
I would love to have been able to go to the State House with this story, but I know I wouldn't have been welcome. They need
They're not listening.
No, they're not.
So maybe after this primary and after this next election, we might see a change. And if we do, we'd love to have you come down because, as we said, the debate on Proposal 5 goes forward.
Yeah. And that people really have to understand what that's about.
They really need to know before they check that
I
box.
presume you have a plan in place to
Well,
communicate and
this goes beyond Vermont Right to Life now, because there are those who respect the Constitution who say, don't change it. It's a historical document.
Right.
And to amend it, to put abortion in it, and whatever else this means.
Our
So I think
forefathers
we're
are
gonna-
turning over, right?
Right. And especially when you think our founding fathers at the national level outlined the right to life as the first right. So I think we're going to be joined by more than just Vermont Right to Life on this fight, in this fight. And we're going to
I
need
think
it.
once people realize what this is all about, I was just telling you, somebody I knew kept saying, "No, I'm right. You know, I women's right, blah blah blah." And then when I told her that it went up to 9 months, she just got so upset, and she was totally against it because she didn't realize that that it went all the way to 9 months.
And they did this thing with, semantic gymnastics in the State House, and there's a school of thought that says there's no such thing as late-term abortion because late-term abortion is killing a baby after it's born. That's what they mean. So there's
that's
a whole.
their-
Yes, that was a thread that got picked up in the State House. So when they say there's no such thing, or they tell you it doesn't happen,
Yeah.
that's because they think a late-term abortion is post-pregnancy.
Oh,
So be sure to ask
know. Yes,
closely.
good to know that.
But still, I've always said second and third trimester belong in the same category because now we have a potentially viable baby.
Right.
So we should be talking about 21, 22 weeks, feeling pain and,
Right.
and able to
Right.
live outside the womb.
right.
And that balance of rights.
Well, it's just like the video we're going to see about the 1 pound baby, for heaven's sake. And it's
1 pound.
viable. My girlfriend's grandson was born where so little that they had to put warm water in a doctor's glove, and that's where they put the baby to get him comfortable and let him go to sleep. And this, you see him
And
outside
the
playing.
baby's opinion
He's
warm.
all grown up. He's working. He's running around, and there he is. And he started out a little rough, but he's here.
Technology is going to take
Yeah,
us
it's
places we can't
amazing.
imagine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I want to read you something. I saw this, and I said, well, I'll read it, and then Mary can respond to it, and both of you, actually. I'm just going to read this. The pro-abortion argument is that a woman has a right to do what she wants with her body, but the baby is not actually part of a woman's body. It is a completely new life on its own. The fetus grows in the woman's womb and floats separately in the embryonic fluid. It is attached by the umbilical cord for nourishment, but when the baby is born or aborted, it separates completely from the woman and the woman's body remains unchanged. So, given that this is a separate life, what are we doing? Why doesn't that separate life have the right to live?
Yes.
I mean, who is that separate?
It just seems so obvious.
Yeah.
Do you wonder? Yeah, because it's hard for us to respond, but it's just so obvious. They talk about, if I have a right to my body, but this isn't really my body; it's my baby, and maybe they should think of that.
I agree.
But they keep
And
calling
it's
it.
fascinating.
What do they call it at 9 months?
It's still a fetus. That will
Really?
still be, and a fetus just means a young one. That's Latin for a young one. So we always think of it this way: a baby comes like in its own little suitcase. So all the work, everything's done by this little
Right.
Embryo that, from the moment of conception, unpacks the umbilical cord, attaches to the mother's uterus, sends the signal to begin the cells that will eventually
Right.
make for milk in the mother's breasts. And then when it's time for delivery, it's the fetus itself that sends that hormonal signal to start labor.
Time.
So it's like a little visitor in the mother's womb. It's a little complete little person with a suitcase that came with his own suitcase. So we can look at this as though it's terrible for women. Senator Tim Ash repeatedly said in the State House that abortion is necessary to make women equal people. Or we can start looking at this as though this is a beautiful thing that can happen to you. And yes, you need to rise above your circumstances, but do that. We can be a society that promotes life. Regardless of what the law says, we can promote life and get those numbers down to zero. And I reject the idea that abortion makes a woman an equal person. I reject that out of hand.
A woman becomes an equal.
He wants to enshrine, he said it on the floor, to enshrine abortion in our state constitution because abortion makes women equal people.
Gee, thanks.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I know, really, thanks a lot.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm going to
Doesn't
vote
it
for
take
him.
2 to tango?
Well, yeah.
Always has. Always has.
I mean, I just think that's disparaging of women. We had testimony in the State House from the Governor's Commission on Women. They said it was economically better for women to have abortions, that they were better to keep the number of pregnancies to 2 or even 1, and best of all, none. And they also said to delay, abortion helps delay so that a woman can be economically successful.
Wonderful.
So how does this happen?
That's what Japan does, right? 2.5 kids, and that's it.
Japan and China,
Yeah, and China, right.
they'll round you up and you'll be
Yeah.
forcibly aborted in China.
Right.
Yeah.
It's great.
So
So I read 3 of the most common pro-choice arguments because I know we all know people who disagree with us, but it's very hard to find ways to change their mind if they're both sides, I think, are just dug right in.
they are dug in.
And I don't understand that side, and I usually am pretty good at trying to understand, but I can't. So here's the first one, and maybe then you both can weigh in. A fetus is not alive until it is born, and therefore does not have any own right to life. I know we disagree with that for a lot of reasons, because when is a baby, right?
So for me,
Is
the
it?
moment of
The
conception.
moment of conception, right.
It's a separate and unique human life.
Right.
That's undeniable, and that's science. 96% of biologists will tell you that a human life begins at conception. The other 4% are playing politics,
Really?
because there's no denying it. But, however, we can move to places of agreement. Do you agree that women should be offered every opportunity to carry her baby to term,
Right.
to get her education, to stay on track for a job, to be and have a successful outcome? And I think pro-choice people would agree with that.
Yeah.
But there's zero funds from the state for that. Our money goes to Planned Parenthood. So there are, I think there are people with big hearts and compassion, and I believe, and I would like to throw this in if I can take one more minute. So the Vermont Right to Life Committee has been around since 1974 as the Vermont Right to Life Committee. And abortion numbers in Vermont in 1985 were 3,500 a year. And as we said earlier in the show, those numbers are down to 1,204. So constantly showing the beauty of life in the womb, advocating for alternatives is dropping the number. We have successfully dropped that number.
Oh, right.
So that's the goal. That should be our shared goal.
Right.
If you are pro-choice and you can't share that goal of dropping the numbers, then you have to refer to yourself as pro-abortion,
Right.
right?
Okay, so the other one was not everyone has access to contraceptives to practice safe sex. I think it's everywhere. And even if you don't have money, you
everywhere.
can get it. Planned Parenthood, you can get it in a million places. I'm sure if you're in college,
It's very
you
available.
go to the nurse's office and they'll be handing it out. And
Well, when they return to the legislature in August, there is a bill to put it in the middle school, have contraception in the nurse's office in middle schools, 6th graders and up.
notice the silence.
It's there, yeah.
So when do they want these children to start experiencing life? I mean, what is that about? When do kids start these days
Having sex?
having sex? No, seriously, because
Earlier and
it used to
earlier.
be prom night.
You at least got to be
Yeah, you got
18.
to be- It was prom night. That was the deal.
Yeah, well, we have a K through 12 sex education, comprehensive sex education programs, and so they're starting to plant seeds very early in children's minds. And look at the TV shows and
Right,
the movies.
that's true.
Things have changed.
They have.
Yeah.
I know, and so part of me goes along with being available in the schools, but
Well, if they're going to do it, it should be available, so it's sort of a catch-22.
it is a catch-22. And then, of course, I've done some subbing in grade school, and along about 5th and 6th grade, you're watching these young girls start maturing. Much earlier than I ever did.
That's
I'm
right.
still a
Puberty has moved
tomboy.
far
Yeah.
back, yeah.
But, and also I saw situations where you know that the parents are not involved at home.
Right, right.
And that's another,
Very sad.
subject in itself.
Right.
It's very.
They didn't even bother to discuss parental notification much this go-round. It was just like dismissed. They didn't even bring it up.
Well, on the age 57, there were 3 amendments for parental consent,
they
parental
tried,
notification, and they were just shot down.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we had some folks that were working it. That was good. So the last one is it's her body and she can choose to do what she wants with it. And I say she also has a responsibility. You just can't use it as a contraceptive in itself.
And that is essentially what age 57 and Proposal 5 are saying, that abortion is just another method of family planning. And that is what we heard in testimony from the abortion providers at the State House.
Yeah.
It is just another method of family planning. And that is a message we need to get out, because most Vermonters, according to our public opinion polls, do not support that.
Right. Good, I hope so. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the governor, because I know you've worked closely with him on this issue, and he was very adamant back when he was running for lieutenant governor that it be 3 months maximum for abortion, and definitely parental notification.
And no taxpayer funding.
And no taxpayer. And this
I was very
go-around-
fond. Yeah, I was fond of him when he was in the early days. But obviously, Planned Parenthood spent hundreds of thousands of dollars against him as in his race for governor.
Yeah.
And identified him as an anti-abortion activist, which wasn't true. We have never.
Right,
we
right,
always
right.
identified Phil Scott as pro-choice.
Right.
However, they pounded him with commercials, and it has its effect. It has its effect on Supreme Court nominees. It has its effect on when you are personally pummeled night after night. And so I was not aware he had moved that far over, and I was personally shocked when he signed.
Yeah, because he
age
got
57.
100% from Planned Parenthood. That's when I knew. I was riding in my car and I heard that and I went, oh,
Yeah.
we've changed our mind.
He changed his mind, and he leapt with both feet into the other camp, because the simple request from pro-lifers was, please just don't sign it. It's going into law. It had such support in the legislature that even if he vetoed it, it would have gone into law.
Right.
But he actually had a ceremony and with a smile signed it. So that is, now we have, what before we had nothing by default, now we have state-sanctioned abortion throughout pregnancy, unregulated, unlimited, and endorsed by our governor's signature. So
We've come a long way from, because we used to do some good fighting back then.
we did.
Yeah.
You were there.
I was.
We had fun.
I'm sure there'll be more.
We will never give up. So
Proposal 5 has, people have got to understand
they
that.
have to. And if you allow this language into our state constitution, you will have carved abortion in granite. It will be nearly impossible to ever get that out again.
Right.
So it's going to take a huge educational project for us.
That's a good point. Mary, we have just a couple of minutes left. Is there anything you and Gail would like to say to folks that are listening?
Thank you for inviting us, and I hope that people watching this will listen carefully and understand why we're talking about this in this show, and do some serious thinking about it.
Yeah. Because there must be a lot of people out there wanting to adopt, and mostly wanting to adopt
heavens.
babies. Right? I mean, when it's hard
list is
to
endless.
adopt somebody a little bit older only because they're sort of already formed and
Well, yes, and if you're in the foster care system, DCF has so many restrictions, and you can't really have a positive impact on a child because you're almost constrained.
oh really?
Oh, yeah. Well, someday we should talk about that.
There's another show.
Yeah, there is another show, and there's a lot of people who would like to do foster care. And
Yeah, I
just
would
cannot.
actually. I've been talking
Yeah.
about it forever.
Yeah.
I'd
Well,
love to.
and the other thing that's important to know, there's 2 million couples that would like to adopt a baby in the United States, and they would like to adopt more than one.
Wow.
And then there are places in every state where when people are on waiting lists to adopt a baby with Down syndrome.
Yeah,
I mean, and
right.
so these are the kind of things we wish we could get out there more so that we have more positive outcomes for babies and their mothers.
Yeah, that's great.
I have a question. Is the Elizabeth Lund home is no longer, is that correct?
No, the Lund Family Center still, and they do wonderful work. They really do.
And what
they
is that for women who are pregnant?
Yes,
Oh,
you can stay there. They help you with your education.
Yeah.
They help you put the baby up for adoption. Yes, they do a very fine job. And there's Catholic Charities, and and all of the 11 crisis pregnancy centers I spoke about earlier are all there to help with a positive resolution. It's very important to know that adoption is totally different than it was You can put your baby up for adoption. You can have visitation rights, pictures, letters. You can stay in
Oh,
touch. All
that's
kinds
great.
of.
That's
We
wonderful.
worked really hard on adoption reform in the
that's good.
legislature.
Another
yeah.
quick story.
Sure.
I did my OB training down at Boston Lying Inn in Boston, and back then, I can't remember the name of it, I'll think of it, but women that would come in to have their babies, and so many times they would say they didn't want to see the baby, they didn't want the baby.
Right.
And more than once, I was working with a young girl and
wanna
said,
say no.
I want to see it.
Right, for sure.
Okay, and then, not always, but oftentimes, they would take the baby home.
Right,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Motherhood kicks in.
Motherhood kicks in.
Yes.
Is
Well,
right.
thank you both very much for
Thank
being
you.
with us. I really appreciate it. We'll have to do another show next biennium.
Sounds good.
Yes. Thank you all for watching and listening, I hope. We'll see you next week, and in the meantime, keep listening beyond the sound bites.